We continue. Next, hottest areas for investment in gaming and esports, which is moderated by another friend of Webit for a long time, Dobromira Boyadjieva, who is management consultant at ADL. Dobi, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be discussing the hottest areas for investments in gaming and esports. I have here with me Tony from Newzoo. He brings more than 15 years of experience in consulting in the gaming space. And Reinout, who is also a video games investor and corporate advisor. He's been in the gaming space for more than 20 years. So we're very lucky to have these two gentlemen with us. Hi, both.
Hi. Hello, good to be here.
I think we should cut to the chase and start with the trends that you've seen in the last, in 2020 and 21 that have made the biggest impression on you. It would be great to set the scene a little bit for our audience and see what are these things that really made an impact in 2020. There was a big hype around gaming and esports, a lot of engagement, what has happened and what will continue going forward. Tony, I give the word to you first.
Sure, happy to provide the 20,000 foot view on that. Because Newzoo has produced some really great research in the recent months kind of on 2021 and what are the trends that we're seeing and what are the trends that are likely to continue. I mean, it's hard to have a conversation about video games, trends and investments without mentioning COVID. Right now, we're starting to look to a world, hopefully, post-pandemic. And the question has become, what trends were novel and created during COVID? What trends did COVID accelerate? And what trends were ephemeral? What's going to fade away? And what are the trends that are going to be more permanent? And the short answer that we have on that is that COVID didn't create a whole lot of completely new dynamics in the games industry, but they accelerated a lot of trends that were happening already. This trend, and that'll tie into the broader macro level gaming trends that I think we'll touch on today, but you see this acceleration towards games becoming social media unto themselves, social networks. You see this acceleration towards metaverse, which is a part of this. You see this rapid onboarding of people, particularly in developing economies, particularly on mobile. You see a lot of people wanting to share their experiences, and you see this record engagement with platforms that allow streaming and sharing. And then that also leads to the question of what is gaming going to look like, given that a lot of the people that were just dabbling in gaming may churn away? What makes players stay? And that will lead to a battle for retention among publishers as they compete for every minute of entertainment and gaming and every next dollar out of gaming consumers globally.
Yeah, interesting. Reinout, what is your cut on this?
I would say crisis has always been good for gaming. And with COVID, we've seen many people stuck at homes, obviously being on any kinds of devices. And like Tony said, it's nothing new, but whatever was in the pipeline, it accelerated. If you look at the last year, I think the buzzing words that everyone has heard about is all about blockchain, NFTs, and of course the metaverse, where companies like Epic and Tencent, Facebook take a major lead in announcing how they see the metaverse, how they see that for their users. And that's very interesting for gaming. I think gaming is an initiator on all these buzzwords. So I'm looking forward for the next year.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit later on which are these types of investors that really go after these buzzwords. But maybe beforehand, there has been a lot of M&A in the industry, and especially sparked during the last years. What is your take on that? Is it the large companies that go after M&A? Who are the players that are really buying and who are the players that are selling, and in what areas do we see these M&As going on? Tony, maybe I give the floor.
I'd defer to Reinout first, actually, as an investor himself. Yeah.
When you talk about M&A, the first name that pops up is always Tencent. It's sort of like the holy company. If they knock on your door, then you should be happy. But in all honesty, there are a few other companies that are really active on that front. For example, Embracer, you have Media and Games Invest. And then obviously Microsoft has made a very interesting couple of moves, not only taking over game studios, but also looking at services that they can supply to their gamer community. So it's the bigger companies that are very active, but also you see private equity companies being very active lately. I would like to say that it's more like the surrounding of gaming, but I've seen some private equities also making some acquisitions in the gaming space itself. So quite vibrant, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that those are many of the key players. If you were to take the universe of investors, you could lay them out on a spectrum between the very, very risk-taking on one end and the slightly more conservative on the other. And towards that very bullish risk-taking end, you see venture capital willing to invest in, indie studios and games and very, very new things that may not realize value for the next 5 years. Then you see sort of growth equity or more ambitious, more risk-taking private equity willing to invest in the game studios. And then you see more traditional private equity or sovereign wealth funds that are looking for ways to invest in gaming that is agnostic to content risk. They don't like necessarily, investors on that end of the spectrum don't like betting on whether a game will be a hit or not. They like these kind of a rising tide lifts all boats type of investments. And that's where you begin to see a lot of investments around hardware and game tech and ad tech and esports and streaming and all those different elements of the gaming ecosystem that is not strictly gaming. And so from an investor's point of view, the sort of first order decision you have to make is your willingness to invest into content, into actual game studios or publishers. And then from there, you have two very different decision trees that kind of branch out. And we can explore those each individually, but they both have very, very unique dynamics, and investors invest into those areas for very different reasons.
Let's talk, I love this qualification of the different investors, but let's talk a little bit about the value pools. Where do we see money in the system? And which are the biggest buckets of value pools within the value chain? And also, what are the relative margins that different players can extract at the different value chain steps? And maybe we can start the discussion with the gaming perspective, and then we can move into the esports, because these are like these two separate buckets that we can look into.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in there, because I could be a little cheeky and say the value is everywhere, but when it comes to investing in gaming, it is a target-rich environment, and it really depends on what your risk profile is and your ROI philosophy is. But to be as specific as I can, if you look at, this is an interesting time to invest in gaming, because we may be at an inflection point where a lot of the people, a lot of the entities taking a lot of value capture now may be disrupted or disintermediated by emerging technology. So to answer that question now, you'd say something like, where's the money? Where's the value? Well, it's in mobile gaming. It's which is still the largest and fastest growing of the gaming platforms. Where's the value? A lot of value is captured by platforms. The Apple App Store, Steam, Valve, you have the Google Play Store. So owning a platform is extremely advantageous, which is why Microsoft would look to be extremely well positioned. So it's captured but it's also captured by just the hit titles. Gaming is is an industry where a lot of the largest titles, Fortnite, Candy Crush, all those big names capture a lot of the value in the industry. So you can look at a lot of those players, but then you look towards things like cloud gaming or metaverse or different sort of NFT blockchain. And those are interesting despite being buzzwords, because they may disrupt a bit how value is captured right now. So the industry may look incredibly different 5 years from now.
Reinout, what is your perspective on the pitch decks that you've seen? What is hot and what is not?
Um, Everything is hot when you talk about gaming, but that's perspective. The nuance is, I would say, twofold. Investing in gaming is still risky. You never know if you're going to have that hit game. Everyone is hoping for it. There's a huge competition out there. Like Tony said, you have the stores. Everyone wants to be on top of the store, wants to be most visible. Everyone is trying to get that user into their game. What I've seen over the past year is that I would say the lifetime value of a gamer in a game has significantly increased. So you have a longer period, I would say, to monetize that gamer. So that makes it for investors more attractive to finally get into gaming and put their bets in. And I on purpose say put their bets in, because you're never too sure. So looking at pitch decks, the way we would look at pitch decks is all about track records of founders. Have they been able to execute before this company in another type of studio? Can they attract talent? Can they retain the talent? And getting talent is really difficult. Although, and even through COVID, more people are working from home. So it's people are working in different locations with each other on a game. Still, that I think made a change in game development for the good and for the bad. And two, what is their vision? And when you talk about vision, yeah, obviously in the last year, you see a lot of decks coming in. Everyone wants to jump on that ride called NFT, metaverse. You know, companies like Epic can really word it very nicely, the metaverse. But don't forget, they have a huge game already. They already make significant amounts of revenue, so they can test. And for younger, smaller developers, I have one advice. First, get a real game, get it to work, get your community, get your localization done. Make sure that you get the revenues in order, and then you can boss all you want.
Interesting. I want to pick up on one point that you mentioned, that the lifetime value of a gamer actually increases. And Newzoo have quite a lot of consumer insights, and they have different profiles of gamers, which I find really interesting. Have you observed this, that this what mentioned by Reinout?
Yes, and thank you for the plug. This is one of the trends that we follow very closely in our consumer insights, precisely because it has relevance to investments today. If you look at some of the major investments that have been made just in the past year, you look at the valuations that Tencent pays for companies, or Microsoft's acquisition of Bethesda was something like $7.5 billion. Roblox IPO'd at a market cap of 50 or 60 billion plus. The fact that the average consumer can be monetized over a much longer tail, that translates into present values today, just going by basic kind of financial logic. And so one of the reasons you're seeing some of the M&A values in the space just be so eye-poppingly large is because they're factoring this in. The other thing is that as Newzoo researches and tracks the way consumers are engaging, gaming consumers are obviously not monolithic. They differ from geography to geography. They differ from genre to genre. And then within a genre, you have different players play these games for different reasons. And so as gaming has become more complex, the gamers that engage in those games are more multifaceted than ever. And if I had to say, you know, what's one trend, the top line trend that, you know, is kind of an umbrella over a lot of the other trends Newzoo covers, is the evolution of games themselves, where games evolved from being products to services with the rise of live ops and always online multiplayer. Then they evolved from products to services to franchises, where you'd be attracted to the same IP game after game after game for decades. And now they've gone from products to services to franchises to platforms, ecosystem. That's kind of the jump that people are trying to make. They're trying to become the next Roblox or the next walled garden. And that's where a lot of these kind of metaverse or proto-metaverse discussions come in, because games themselves are evolving far beyond the products they once used to be. and players are thus monetized in a very different way over a much longer tail.
I'm just going to pick up on one thing you mentioned, to the development of ecosystems. And the fact is that there's quite a lot of companies that evolve and grow around the gaming ecosystem, whether it will be around operations, game operations, whether it will be around game analytics. How do you see this space, and what is the potential there to capture value in relation to the other components of the value chain?
Well, from my point of view, and this is exactly where a lot of those sort of private equity investors are looking at investing, a lot of it is on the game tech side. That involves, the tools and technology and middleware you use to actually create games. But that's a very, very wide area, because the technology used to make games is increasingly becoming interlinked with the technology used to make money with games. And by that, I mean things like games are increasingly becoming monetized through in-game advertisements. And so you see a lot of opportunity to, not in ad tech, you see opportunity. In game tech, in the game engines, you see opportunity. You could even say NFTs are another kind of a component kind of floating out there in the orbit, because they're all different ways of linking monetization into the game creation process. And that's something players are doing more and more. So I'm very interested in middleware, because you look at the big companies like Unity and Unreal with Epic, a lot of these games are developed on. They are competing to be the most complete suite of tools possible. And right now, being a complete suite of tools for a game developer is not the tools to make the game, it's the tool to advertise the game, to monetize the game, to keep players, to analyze players. And so the integration of all these very interesting forms of technology within the core engine is where I see a lot of opportunity, because that's putting more tools in the hands of developers and allows them to make very, very much more robust games, just as indies or as entrepreneurs, than they were capable of 10 or even 5 years ago.
Interesting. Reinout, what is your view around these companies that emerge in the ecosystem around the gaming community and game developers?
Well, essentially, the game developer can focus more on what they need to do, develop a game. And I think that's already difficult enough. But obviously it's very interesting. If you look at the days that mobile came in, you had to go via Apple, Google, the stores. Right now you see the battle between Epic and Apple about the percentage. 30%, is it too much? Can there be a deal made, perhaps? But also on the side of ad tech, there's a lot of money being spent, as I said, on user acquisition. I believe AppsFlyer mentioned 40 billion or something this year. So there are different companies to work with to make sure that your game becomes visible. Then on the development side, yeah, like Tony said, you have the Unreal, you have Unity, where Unity was, I think, ruling it for a long time. You hear more and more Unreal. I think that's also with the buzzwords that are going around, with Epic profiling very much on Metaverse. I think also with the Epic grant, they take a very interesting position right now in the industry. But yeah, there is more to it, from translation to community services, et cetera, I mean, a game developer can use many companies, tools, services, and platforms in order to publish their games. And obviously, what we see is private equity investing quite heavily in that ecosystem around games. But in all honesty, I'm also seeing, again, what I said, they come to the core, to games development. So as soon as a company is able to develop a portfolio of games that make significant amounts of revenues, they qualify for private equity investments.
Picking up on that straight away, actually, Tony mentioned the different types of investors, but if we classify them into, let's say, VCs and Ps, the tech investors, even the telcos, or even let's say, the local entrepreneurs, of course, each of them has a different risk appetite. But can we outline for our audience which are the areas that you most typically see that these different types of investors invest into? What are the areas that they invest into, from a, let's say, toe in the water strategy of simple commercial partnerships to, let's say, more all-in strategy, let's say even into game development or even own platform development? Maybe we start with the VCs and the private equities. You mentioned this previously.
Yeah, but before you have actually a VC on board, you talk about another group of people that I think is very important for the games industry. Underestimated, sometimes people make fun of it. I hate the term friends, families, and fools. Definitely the last word. But friends and families can kickstart or bringing in your own money to the game, literally. Then you have enough seed companies, funds that are interested in helping you. For example, a company like Play Ventures. And then once you reach a critical amount of revenues and you think portfolio and you have a proper vision and you have a good team developed around you, then venture capital is ready to get in. But it's not easy. But luckily what we've seen is there are more venture capital firms in different countries, and they tend to invest in their local gardens, which is good. And when they hold good ties with venture capitalists in other territories, they can attract more VC money. And then obviously, once you talk about a round B or C, then you can actually maybe expect a strategic investment. You have companies like Tilting Point that are publishing your games, but as soon as they see that you're doing well, they could actually help you with increasing marketing spend on a game, but maybe also invest in your games company. They raised, I think, about 240 million last year, or this year actually. So very interesting to see how a publishing model can also lead to an investment model. And then lastly, you have the private equity that basically is looking for one thing: how can we scale the company? And they bring different kind of talent and expertise to a studio and making it a real company. I would even emphasize the word game studio to a gaming company, because at one point when you have certain skill, you might actually start developing your own tech in-house, or see different kind of openings in the market where you can bring something new, maybe for other developers. And that's where private equity jumps in.
Tony, what is your view on this sort of investors?
I agree with all of that. And just to pick up, the traditional role of a publisher has changed a lot over the last decade. As physical distribution has gone away, you don't necessarily go to a publisher to say, we're going to print the CDs and ship them to the stores anymore. They've taken on much more the role of an investor. And that's very interesting for a company that's just created a title that's becoming successful. Maybe they've gotten past an A round or a B round of funding, and they're trying to figure out where does the next 50 million in capital come from. And it's a very interesting world, because I say it's a very open field for competing for capital, where your next 50 million in funding could come from a Tencent or a Microsoft just as well as it could come from a sovereign wealth fund or some traditional investors that aren't going to bring as much expertise, but will bring the money. And the question is, for a lot of entrepreneurs, is where are you as a company? Are you trying to get to that next level where you need the expertise, where it would be beneficial for you to be plugged into, for example, Tencent's network and ecosystem and benefit from their scale and marketing, or to be plugged into Microsoft's, Xbox Game Pass and their whole platform and walled garden. So the question is, every next dollar of funding is not equal, and so entrepreneurs have more choices than ever, but it largely depends on what's right for them at the time. At the life cycle of their company. The question that I actually would like to throw to Reinout is related to the first thing he said about friends, family, angel investing, seed investing. What I've seen is that the major games engines, to link to our prior conversation, have become so much robust. They put so many awesome tools in the hands of indie developers that a team of 5 people could make a game that it would take a team of 30 people to make, 5 years ago. And I'd be interested to hear, based on what he's seeing, if these kind of venture proposals are reflecting that games are more robust in terms of features than ever before when they enter this sort of venture round.
Yeah. First of all, I think the quality of decks have improved over the years. Sometimes you wonder, if you look at a games deck or a tech play deck, it's about how to execute. You could very much say that coming up with a game concept is possible for everyone. Developing a good game, I think, with all the tools that are around there, a quality game can be developed. But how are you going to publish it? How are you going to make sure that your community, your future community, is going to embrace you, is going to give you money? And when we start talking about the buzzwords again, do they understand what you're trying to bring? I don't expect you to make your community understand what blockchain is, but how are you using it in the game design? How is metaverse going to be cool? Not for us to talk about all kinds of examples, how we envision the future with gaming, like Meta is doing, but really down to the core. How does it work in gameplay? How does it monetize, or how can it bring fun to the game? And I think lately I'm seeing so many different kind of decks where everyone wants to jump the wagon on all these buzzwords, but sometimes I'm forgetting what is the real value for the gamer community. And I think that makes a difference in types of decks that I'm currently seeing. Having said that, from in the beginning of the year, only Roblox and Epic telling about metaverse during a GamesBeat conference I saw, to now everyone, literally everyone, talking about metaverse. I've seen significant amounts of improved decks where the gameplay, I can now see how metaverse could work. And with that coming to play, I can now also see how a gamer community could actually thrive on an idea of an NFT or a cryptocurrency. But I'm still careful with that.
And is there a particular type of investors that is more ready to jump on these investments that are around the buzzwords?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you are in gaming as an entrepreneur, if you have developed games, or you have been in gaming for quite a while, you know that this game industry is very sensitive when it comes to buzzwords. I mean, if I look back on my own history, by the time I thought I understand how we could actually market games on the web, suddenly there was mobile, free to play, you name it. It has gone very, very fast. And glass half full, half empty, you shouldn't actually see it as half full. It is very opportunistic, but it also creates opportunities. I think gaming, to that sense, is very interesting for gaming entrepreneurs that have done extremely well and would like to reinvest money, but now in talent that they have worked with.
We spoke a little bit about the tech players, and we mentioned also Microsoft before. Is there anything that we can learn around their investments and their growth path in gaming?
I can take that. I think that a couple of the reasons why people feel that Microsoft is quite well positioned is that they've taken a very consumer-centric approach to gaming and developing their ecosystem. And just to take a couple of examples, they understand that gaming is becoming platforms and ecosystems, and so they've embraced this kind of multi-platform or cross-platform, or what Newzoo likes to call platform agnostic form of gaming, where if you are if you're part of the Xbox ecosystem, you have access to playing games on a console, on a PC, on cloud gaming, or into access games through a subscription. You have kind of all of these new ways of accessing games that they're embracing, that a lot of other players, EA and Ubisoft are also embracing, which is that you want to be able to play the same game from any device, and cloud gaming begins to enable that technology. You want to be able to access a very, very large library of games without needing to buy each one. And so you've seen one of the big trends we've seen is this explosion of subscription plans to access games, where you access games like a Netflix library, and that has its own kind of internal dynamics for how entrepreneurs approach that space, because it fundamentally changes the balance of power among the different parties. But at least from the consumer perspective, Xbox understands you may want to just play a game and dive into it instantly, which cloud kind of enables without needing to wait for your Xbox to download it, or say, okay, I'm done with this, but at least I didn't pay for it because I'm on a subscription. And so you jump to the next game. It's much more oriented towards how consumers are going to be engaging with games over the next 5 years and how they've been different from the last 5 years. And that's why Microsoft is such an interesting case study to look at as an ecosystem as a whole.
Reinout, what is your take on, and what are your lessons learned from the growth path that Microsoft has taken?
Oh, well, I remember the launch of the Xbox, and then they had PC games, and it looked all a bit fragmented. But it's a tech play and it's a gameplay that they are doing. And right now, also, when you look at their vision around and about cloud gaming, I think they really went out there and made a few acquisitions that brought so much cohesion in their total strategy and list of portfolio games. At any given time, at any given place, on any given device, that's gaming. That's gaming for me, and I think they are playing that game right now in terms of M&A, investing, but also execution within their own studios or the studios that they have acquired. So if you look at it at a total perspective, I think Microsoft right now is, in terms of vision and strategy, they are the company to beat, if you had to beat anyone. But that's the company I think you can learn a lot from at this moment. They're in a good place.
And you mentioned a little bit valuations perspective. What are the typical EBITDA multiples that these M&As are at? Of course, we talk about a broad range.
Yeah, it depends on genre. It depends on territory. It depends on the growth of a company, the sexiness of a company. Don't forget that sometimes when you would like to invest in a company that is sending its pitch deck to some investors, the investors among themselves are going to call each other and say, like, hey, this is really interesting. Some early investors find it a must to get into that games company. What is a good valuation in terms of a start of a company? Very difficult. That's gut feeling versus there is a market that leads the way a bit. But once you're actually raising money, I think a broad range, what you requested, 5 to 10 on an EBITDA is what you see in terms of multiples. Upon exit, I've seen some very strange deals where I couldn't really understand the valuation, if you look at the financial play, but I could see the strategic value within the company that acquired a game studio or a gaming service related company.
Yeah, definitely this needs to be factored in. I want to talk briefly about the other type of investors into gaming and esports, and these are the telcos. They've been trying to enter into that space for a long time. They have been discouraged a little bit because of lack of success, especially the early stages of gaming with their online stores of mobile games in the 2010s even. What are some of the successful cases that you've observed, maybe, Tony, to you, of telcos entering into gaming and esports, and why do they enter?
So it's a multifaceted question because there are a lot of avenues they can go. I would say that you can look at the way they invest as either a customer acquisition strategy or as a value-added service, basically, which is that mobile is the largest and fastest growing platform for gaming. It will be for some time. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity to combine mobile gaming with cross-play gaming or cloud gaming or VR or all these other exciting cross-platform ways. And so you see technology like 5G and edge computing kind of leading the way for that, and as one of the key enablers. It acts fairly symbiotically. And so you can look to places like South Korea and Japan, where a lot of telcos have very successfully sort of taken advantage of internet infrastructure to unlock new forms of gaming. And that tends to be better as a customer acquisition strategy rather than trying to create a cloud gaming platform yourself. I mean, I think that there are a few more prominent examples of that not working, or where you've seen success. You see success with markets with telcos trying to use partnerships, for example, to enter the space. And so if we're going to try to do both customer acquisition and value-added services, you could say, they could try to work with like an NVIDIA or one of the other major kind of cloud gaming platforms, kind of combine all of this. It tends to be more successful than, as you mentioned, developing an entire white labeled library yourself, because you're seeing right now, as gaming move towards subscriptions, you're seeing competition for subscriptions. Do people want a Netflix subscription and a Hulu and an HBO, et cetera, et cetera? The question becomes, do I want an Xbox subscription and a mobile game subscription and something through my telco? And the answer is probably not in a lot of cases. You can suffer from subscription fatigue. So finding ways to unlock new customers through partnerships is probably the best way to go right now, as opposed to kind of wholesale acquisition of games or esports companies for telcos.
Yeah, there have been even riskier strategies. So with Turkcell, even hiring like 100 developers to develop their own games. But of course, that's one end of the spectrum. I agree with you that a lot of the telcos that we see go into the partnerships route, whether it's white labeling other players or whether forming different types of commercial partnerships. One last question I have for you, gentlemen, is around the role of governments in the growth of the ecosystems. And of course, we have the local ecosystems developing in different parts of the world. There are different value is being created in different parts of the world, with APAC leading with a substantial share of value in the region there. But what do some of the successful local government activities revolve around?
Shall I ask first? Or?
Reinout, go ahead. Yeah.
Governance. It starts already with education, I would say. Since you talk about governments. Educating a young audience early on how to develop games. It's not only about tech, it's also commercial. So coming from pitch decks, if you look at a team, the founding team, it needs to have the right balance, right? So it needs to be a group of entrepreneurs where there is a techie, where there is a commercial guy, where there's a leader, and it starts already with schooling education to begin with. I think a lot of governments can do better in that. And secondly, it's creating an atmosphere that investors are more at ease to invest in early stage companies, and that means for tech in general. I'm hearing great stories from all kinds of countries here in Europe and around the globe, in fact, of a better ecosystem. There's more investment coming to the table, but still, I think there are a lot of governments that can do better again on that front. Then there are programs when we talk about games now. For example, Finland is very well known for it, with formerly Takis, which is now Business Finland. But you have the size model in UK, Sweden, Germany. They're all having programs in place where game developers can get money when they bring some investment to the table, which is really interesting for the local communities. And lastly, right now, we talked about all these buzzwords, like the NFT. I think governments will soon have to do something in the Department of Legislation. How to make sure that gamers are not going into scams. How can you make sure that legislation will prohibit any potential flaws in NFT blockchain kind of concepts? So it's a wider answer to maybe that you expected, but I think governments right now need to wake up. I hope they've seen what has been accelerated during COVID, and it has gone really fast. And my biggest worry is it has gone too fast for them, while having to deal obviously with things like COVID and how to make sure that we are going to have a healthy place again anytime soon. The industry in the widest sense, not gaming, but also tech, they have made major steps, but you need to protect your consumer also when it comes to tech.
I love that you mentioned the best practices that we need to look up to: Finland, Sweden, Germany. Tony, what is your view? What can governments do to facilitate the growth of the local ecosystem, in as much as this question of gaming is a local versus global thing?
Well, I was about to say exactly that. I think local governments need to recognize that this is a truly global industry and thus a truly global market for talent. That has to do with making it easy for talent to flow into your country, whether that's through special categories of visas that we've seen a lot of governments enable for tech sector workers. I think that's an important part, because it's difficult to say we're going to build a whole ecosystem for game development here, but only have people of our own country here. It doesn't work that way. It's just recognizing that. And I would also say that government should be as transparent as they can around government policies around user data privacy, GDPR, and the rest, because very often the intersection of government privacy policies with kind of tech platform policies like Apple and IDFA, it very directly relates to the ability of game studios to monetize their audience, to target new users, retarget old users, activate people, keep them engaged, figuring out who's who. And that's happening in a world where people are increasingly asking governments to do more around privacy. And so being as transparent as they can, so that whatever the new regime is, game publishers know how they're going to be able to monetize their users in whatever that new regime is.
And the last question to you both, where would you put your money in the gaming and esports space? Tony, go ahead.
Sure. I'm as the more kind of risk-taking or perhaps bullish on the space. I mean, I would be looking to take that first branch, as I described earlier. I'd invest in the game studios, and I do so at the indie level. I think that what's happening right now is very interesting, because you see a lot of consolidation on the high end. You see a lot of indie activity enabled by more robust game engines, and you're seeing people in the middle kind of figuring out what's going to happen, kind of the AA game developers. Are they going to get competed out? Are they going to have to join a subscription plan or eventually just get bought out? I think that there's an opening space in the middle for a lot of indie studios to kind of grow and expand, find that next hit, and go into that kind of mid-core space, that AA space. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm really excited about game tech, as I mentioned. I really like all the different types of middleware that is allowing game studios of 2, 3, 4, 5 people to create, what would have been a AAA experience a decade ago. And so those two things are all kind of related to what I'm most excited about in the industry right now.
Great. Reinout, where would you put your money?
Talent. That's the shortest answer I can give you. It starts with talent, and then anything can go. As soon as I can see that track record is there, they have a good vision, then I'm all ears. I'm 50 and I'm still learning from very young people that bring different kind of ideas and vision to the table. And that's why I answering talent, because I think with my experience and network and a bit of gray, I can bring calmness and some structure, and let them be talent, let them be wild, let them be visionary.
Great. And if we combine both of your answers, we have the perfect match. So thank you very much for dedicating these minutes to listening to us. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Reinout, for the contributions. I hope that was interesting for our audience, and we're looking forward to be of service at any other topic or focusing more on the gaming, all three of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.